This is Energize Radio.
Energize Radio.
Your direct introduction to amazing radio people who do what you do and win. Advice, ideas, strategies to help you help your clients and grow your career.
Energize Radio.
Let's get energized. Here's John Cole.
Another great edition of Energize Radio. You're out there working the streets, working hard, trying to sell people on the benefits of using radio to make their businesses even more fabulous. And we like to introduce you to people just like you who are doing the exact same thing that can tell you not only some of their secrets, but also remind you how great and how lucky we are to work in radio. Joining us today is Tracy Sirna. She is with Results Broadcasting in Northeastern Wisconsin. Tracy, welcome.
Good morning.
So we were chatting before we hit recorded on this, just about your wonderful past of being a radio customer, working in TV, and then making the switch back in to radio. So while radio is, in a lot of people's blood, being a good salesperson, there are a lot of skills that you can transfer from one industry to another. And I think a lot of people, especially these days, because the world has changed somewhat with the pandemic, we start out our days maybe different than we did 4 or 5 years ago. So for you, in this sales environment we're in today, what do you say is the best way to start your sales day tomorrow?
I think for me, and I think it just goes back to, and I think it's organization, which my boss would probably laugh about a little bit. I think as radio and salespeople, a lot of times what makes us creative and be able to multitask doesn't always make us the great organizers, because we're shooting off on different ideas and we get excited about different things. But for me, what I try to do is I try to organize my week and my days by what days I need to be in the office to get things done and what days I need to be out on the road to get things done. And because we live in a rural community, I deal with several little communities. So I try to focus on a community a day. Does that make sense?
Yep.
So that I'm utilizing my time. I'm not driving 30 minutes one direction and 20 minutes another direction. If I'm in one little community, I'm in that community working with those customers and I'm focusing on them. And it kind of gives me a chance to have my brain wrapped around those small businesses and being able to say, hey, I had a conversation with so-and-so. I know this is what your development board is doing for the downtown. And I can think about that community and how they work together and how radio plays into their business development. And then the next day I'm 30 minutes away working on a different community who's got different things going on, and I focus on that. And obviously sometimes that's not driven by cities. Sometimes that's driven by radio campaigns we've got going on at the time.
Mm-hmm. I love that, because I think so many radio stations that would be watching this are in that same ballpark. Certainly all the radio stations I operate, same ballpark. And we have a saying where it's kind of look to your left, look to your right. And if you're at a customer's place of business, when you leave that business, you now have a lot of knowledge about sort of what's going on within 30 minutes of that business. Why not look to your left and your right and spend some time with those businesses as well? Because as you mentioned, you kind of have that instant connection. So I like the way you plan your day, because I think you can get more out of it.
You get more out of it. And I think that the businesses and community get a sense of your investment, because whether, you're not wearing a sign that says I'm in New London today, but your mind frame is there.
Yeah.
Right? So you're thinking about that community and you're thinking about what's going on. You're not trying to think about 12 different other things. You're focused in, and I think it ends up showing up to the customer like, oh, she is part of our team.
Exactly. This year, one of the things as we evolve this series, because we talk about everything from prospecting to presentations to closing, one thing I want to touch on more, because I do know this is different in the United States and it's different in Canada, and that is developing creative messages. So just to give you an idea, in Canada, most radio stations in Canada, we actually have, in our company, we have 5 people. Their only job is to write radio commercials. But I know in the States, that's sometimes different, where the rep takes a more active part in writing the messages for their clients. And then there are some that are kind of in between. So for you, how do you start when it comes to helping your customers develop that message that at the end of the day, it's going to do the heavy lifting?
Well, and I think too, like you said in the US. So we write our own ads at our station. And so we have to come up with the creativity. And for me, I think that's part of what helps me balance out between being the salesperson and then still being able to be creative. So I like that aspect of the job, even though it can be challenging, because obviously as a salesperson, you want to ring the bell, right? But what I do is I try to really look at it from the perspective of the customer. So, and the business, I try to like go in, understand their world, understand their client, their customer. And oftentimes I'm them their customer. So I really try to make sure that not only do you put into, the customer's name needs to be X amount of times, et cetera, but does their ad even make sense? I'm the consumer. Are you using jargon I don't understand? Are you moving me? What are the problems I have when I'm trying to buy shoes? What are the problems I have when I'm trying to buy a car? Those kind of things, and then come up with something creative. So I often say to my customers, your client needs to know you before they need you, especially in this day and age when it comes to the internet and Facebook and click this, click that, blah, 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 blah. Your customer needs to know you before they need you, especially when we're talking about larger things. You're not going to buy a refrigerator more than once a year, once every 10 years, right? You're not going to buy a car every month. You're not going to put your loved one in a nursing home, right? Those are things people need to know you as a resource before they ever need you, or otherwise you're dead in the water. So we talk about that, and that's kind of how you angle the ads that way. From a creative standpoint, I try to come up with for particular customers, like their thing. Does that make sense? Like it's their thing. It makes them unique. I worked with Feral Gas, and the tagline was, you can trust us because you don't ever have to ask, did you smell that? Because of their safety precautions.
Right.
We had a small retail store come in that had a name that it was a clothing store, and the name didn't kind of fit. Does that make sense? Its name was Tumbleweed, and it was a clothing store. So I had to really think about, how are people going to be drawn into this when there's not a lot of connection there, right? So we came up with the Tumbleweed whisper. So it was like tumbleweed, and everybody knew that whisper. And it really so people honed in, and then they were able to listen to the message as far as what they were selling. The caveat to that was everybody knew that whisper in the area, like literally, like even my boss would be like, my kids are doing the whisper. I went into Reinhardt Foods, dealt with their VP of operations, who heads up the driver, just guy, right?
Yeah.
He knew the whisper. And I said to him, so that's the power of radio. You know the whisper. You're a guy. You're not running into that store to buy anything, but you know the whisper. That's what I can do for recruitment for you.
Yeah.
And I think and then just understanding the industry. So when we worked with recruitment, I had to really think about, what does recruitment mean? It doesn't mean what it meant 10 years ago. You're now selling jobs.
Yeah.
Yeah. Reinhardt sells food. Every business out there right now is in the job of selling jobs.
Yeah. I love what
the message changes that way.
I love what you said too about thinking about it. There's two things that stuck with me. One is I love thinking about, what are the problems I have when I buy shoes? What are the problems I have? Because I think that's so important for the message, because the message really is about that person listening and what's in it for them. The other one that I think is so important is, does the message actually make sense? Because I know a lot of times reps get caught up in what they're writing, and their clients get caught up in what is written about them. And both of those two people have something in common. They know what they're talking about. And they don't realize that there's a soccer mom or dad in a van driving with 3 kids in the back, yelling that they want to stop at the next McDonald's.
Right.
And they don't have time to figure out your ad. And one of the little quick things that I used to always do when I was writing an ad is, when I was done with it, I would take it to the person on our staff that I felt was most uninterested in what this commercial was about. And I would say, I'm going to read something to you. I just want you to tell me, do you understand what we're saying? And that's sort of how I would do a little bit of a test with it, because you sometimes you don't know, you're reading it and you're like, it makes complete sense to me, because you know where it is, you know what they sell, you know the person that runs it. So I think that's a very important piece of that puzzle. And all those other points you brought up, absolutely fabulous.
Oh, sorry. And I
Go
think
ahead.
too, the other thing is that I think as the one thing I've had to learn and you can't shove everything into a 1 30-second ad.
No.
So what I tell my customers is let's create 3 ads and build the story because
Yeah.
everybody's going to hear it a little bit different. So we build 3 different ads that necessarily don't have every piece of information in, but they have enough similarities and enough new pieces that you've built a story.
Yeah.
Because that's just how the brain listens and that's how the brain learns. And if you're going to try to shove everything into a 30-second ad, it's a lot of blah, 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 and nobody's hearing anything. It's not moving them. It's not touching them.
Yeah, I think it was Roy Williams maybe that explained it as a foundation. You're building a foundation of a house, and each brick tells a different story. You don't tell every story in every brick. You know, one brick can talk about their amazing customer service, and the next brick can talk about how Chantel at the front desk really understands, you know, how to make sure the shoe is right for your foot.
Right.
And at this next brick talks about that cool customer service story that everyone tells over and over again about why you're so great. Like everyone needs to tell a different story, and collectively they tell your entire story.
Yes, I agree with that totally.
Yeah, very cool. So the world has changed a little bit, and I know the time of year most reps hate the most. And I think everybody hates this time of year, which is let's figure out our budgets for this year. Let's figure out how we're going to grow our business. And I've been doing this a long time, and I know there are a lot of people that they do it from the ground up. They go by every account. They figure out how they're going to sell. There are other reps at the other end that just go raise it by 3 or 4%, and I'll hit it. And then there's a bunch of people that just they don't know, they don't want to start. They're afraid of the process, so they just look at their manager and go, "You tell me." Like whatever you say, I'll do it. And there are other people that no matter what process you go through, they go, "Oh no, it's too high. I can't do that." Like that's sort of how it goes. And all of those people always end up sort of getting there in the end because they're good at what they do. They just,
right.
I think people hate the budgeting process. So how do you plan to grow your business? Because I know at the end of the day, we all have families and we want to make a little bit more money. And we know that there's interesting challenges out there. We know that we have opportunities for our customers that they haven't taken advantage of yet. So how do you go about planning to grow your business?
And I definitely am one of those salespeople that are like, I don't want to talk about all those numbers. If it could be sold, it was sold, kind of thing. But what I've learned with myself is 2 things. Is that, well, maybe 3 things. In radio, you know, I built my base, a strong base from the ground up, and I was very focused on getting year-long contracts because I knew that then I could maximize my time. And so then when I would work with a customer and talk about a year-long contract, I'd say, okay, here's your foundation. We just talked about that, right?
Yep.
Now, every once in a while, let's spike this with something in a radio event, something like that. And that's where your extra money comes in, because once they trust you with the foundation, it's easier to say, let's turn this up, not all year long, but let's turn it up for this one sale, this couple of months, and put a little bit new energy in it, get them involved. A lot of people like events, so there's a little bit more heartstrings involved, and they're willing to do a special campaign because you've built the foundation. So that's one way I grow revenue. The other thing is let's be realistic. We aren't in a top 10 market. We deal with a lot of small to medium-sized businesses. A lot of times they're maxed out. You know, we've hit them hard. They're maxed out. That was my job in securing the year-long contract, right? So the thing is that what couple of things, you keep your pipeline open. The one thing I've learned in radio over and over again, where I end up getting nailed, is I haven't kept my pipeline going, you know, keep moving. And I'm not somebody who's going to say, here's 20, I'm going to move 5, because then I'm more likely to close. And then I pick another 5. And the other thing is that a few years ago, I had to really think about how do we find more money in this market. And for me, I made a lot of money off of recruitment because I went in it in a different direction. I went in it about how do I help, how do I make your HR department bigger than what it is? We'll be your sales force, because now you're selling jobs.
Right.
So my next goal for this year is I've got to kind of find that golden nugget, and it's going to be about finding a new industry and a new niche that needs radio. I think that in smaller markets, that's really how sometimes you have to end up building that base if you've been around for a while, because there is only so much razzle dazzle we can keep recreating, right? We're in a smaller market. It's finding that new industry or that niche of why do they need radio? Why do they need you to be their salesperson?
I always tell our guys, it for me, growing business comes down to four things. One, you got to have a little bit of a plan to go and get some new customers. That's one way.
Right.
One way is you can go out and get more from your current customers, which means you could raise rates, or it means you could take your average sale from $1,000 to $1,050 or
Right.
$1,000 or
Right.
$1,100. And the most important one is make sure you're not losing customers. So
Absolutely.
that comes down to good customer service, not necessarily just at the point of renewal, but 365 days a year. The only other way you can grow a business is cut expenses, which I hate that. That's an accountant talking. So if you focus on those things as a rep, like, okay, what's my plan to get a few new customers? What's, getting more from a current customer might be, just selling them another event,
Right. Right.
selling them one more event a year, which isn't going to break their bank or change things, especially if it's something that genuinely will benefit them. And of course, again, that customer service, I can't stress that enough. I think a lot of reps sometimes set it and forget it is a term that we try and avoid here. Is how do we make sure we're really doing a good job? And I think it was Beth Mann on one of our previous episodes who really made a great point, which is great customer service isn't hard because so many people now are terrible at it. So you don't even have to be outstanding. You could actually be average and be better than most people. But I think you got to have that attack to say, I'm not going to lose anybody.
Well, and I think, we talked about this a little bit before, is that my boss is going to love me saying this. I don't know that I always go in and sell radio. I go in and sell me. I sell my knowledge. I sell the trust of me. I sell my business background. I sell that I'm in it with them. I sell that we're a team, and I sell that I know what I'm talking about, right? And that I know their business and that I can bring a solution. Then I sell radio. And that goes back to old school. I don't know, because I've been selling for so many years, more years than I want to admit. I was fortunate way back when it was kind of the turn of the tide of how people were taught to sell, kind of from that the old card salesman that was, pitch.
Yep.
You're pitching everything but tomatoes and carrots, and that you're not listening, you're just pitching, to what at that time the lingo was knowledge-based selling. And knowledge-based selling was a lot about pitching, lot less about pitching tomatoes and carrots and peas, and a lot more about what do you know about this customer's business? You need to know their business and their industry before you ever walk in the door, and that you're asking pointed, directed questions that are leading to get you where you need to be as far as offering them a solution. And I think that's how I sell. Do I sell on the merits of radio? Absolutely. But probably much to my boss's dismay. I definitely go in and I sell myself as a business partner, and then I sell radio.
No, and I think that makes a lot of sense. And they're not necessarily separated, because to your customer, you are the radio station, right? So, but I totally see what you're saying. Radio is one of those weird things. As I mentioned before, we were talking. Before we hit record, you were talking about having worked in the long-term health business and TV and other jobs along the way. But radio is one of those weird industries that it kind of gets in your blood. Like, you just, even if you go away from it, you still want to come back to it. And even when you're mad at it, you still love it. What do you tell people when you tell them you work in radio? What is it that excites you, that story you want to share about why you love working in radio?
And I think it goes back to what we just talked about. First of all, I love the group of radio stations I work for. It's a family-owned business. It's small. They've been great to me. It's allowed me the flexibility to, as a woman, have a career and still be a mom. And I think that's great. It also gives me a sense of feeling very invested in my community, because I'm working with these small businesses. They know me, right? They know me from church. They know me from school. They know me from radio. And I'm invested with them. I'm invested in making these communities grow, because I want my kids to have a livelihood. I want a livelihood. I want our communities to grow. We're in this together. And radio gives me that opportunity to feel like I'm out there moving and shaking with the community and making a difference. And in radio, obviously, people love our stations because we've got great DJs. We play the right genre of music for rural America, classic rock and country. You know, people are right into it. And I love radio, but I also love all of our events. So that gives it kind of that three-dimensional feel. And so I guess what radio offers me, and what I feel like the pizzazz is, not only do I get to be a business partner, but I'm part of the community and I'm helping keeping it grow. I'm part of the economy.
Yeah. I think sometimes we forget that because we do get caught up in, oh, I got creative due, or that customer's billing needs to be fixed, or, the DJ messed up the contest or the tagline this morning, whatever it might be, because those things happen every day. But at the heart of it, I've been doing this a long time, and everything you just said is a lot of the reasons that I love radio too. Like, I just love the fact that I know that if I'm not helping make a difference in my community, Tracy is. And Tracy's not doing it today. Bruce is. And it's just, we just go through that, and everybody is, helping to move everybody and benefiting everybody. And then people enjoy the product along the way, which is pretty cool too.
Yep.
Plus, I did some really crappy jobs as a kid. And every day I love that I walk into an air-conditioned building with great tunes playing, and everyone's happy. Like, I've done the heavy lifting jobs, and they're not as cool.
Well, and I laugh all the time because I've said this throughout my entire career, because I don't exactly know how I fell into sales, right? I don't know where I was in high school when they were saying, do you want to be a lawyer? Apparently I was not listening. But it's a good thing that God gave me the ability to talk and make money, and have those kind of insights, because I think we would have starved to death otherwise. So I do think that sometimes, as much as I go, I think when you said the art of customer service and the art of this is going away, it is. Mm-hmm. And so I hope it makes us older people a little bit more valuable that way. If you've not seen, you need to see. This movie's got to be at least 20 years old. But The Intern, did you see The Internship with Vince Vaughn?
Yes.
And the transition between, they were selling watches to now everybody's got a phone, and these guys had to learn how to sell again. And they compete against these young kids, but these young kids don't have any social skills. They don't have any of that intuition. They're all technical, and how they had to learn to work off of each other. And I'm like, if that isn't the changing tide, I don't know what is.
Yeah.
So I think that I'm very fortunate not to have to do some manual labor job, and that I get to work with people. And that's really where my energy comes from, is being able to work with people.
Very cool. I know that many people, I know I have an archive of great sales resources and people I've seen over the years, or other radio people I've met that, they just said something small in passing. They didn't even know how much it meant to me. And I took that and turned it into something else. When it comes to selling every day, if you were to give a piece of advice to a new rep, or maybe someone who's having a rough day, to turn things around and to hit their goals, and to be passionate about getting out there and helping customers, what would be the piece of advice that you've learned along the way that just sticks with you and you just love sharing it?
I think we've talked about it a lot here, so I'm probably reiterating the message. I think a lot of times is that if you're in sales, you got to be hungry for the ding. You got to be hungry to ring that bell, and you've got to be motivated. And once those sales start coming in, that creates its own energy, because then you start getting to be that ding monster, right? Mm-hmm. I mean, we're adrenaline junkies, or you wouldn't be in sales, let's be honest, right? So you've got to create that momentum in order to hit that adrenaline, and it's going to feed upon itself. And that is a lot of sometimes hustle and a lot of no's. The other thing is that I say this over and over again. I don't go in and I want to go in and be a business partner. when I walk in the door, I do not want you to be like, oh my God, here goes another salesperson, and I want to hide from them. When I walk in the door, I want them to be like, all right, Tracy's here. We're going to solve something today. And that they have a level of respect for what I'm walking in the door and doing, not that I'm just there trying to sell something. I know that sounds like a contradiction of what I just said, but I think if as a salesperson, if you're walking in and the first thing your people are thinking of is, oh Lord, it's another salesperson, you're dead in the water.
Yeah, I think the strength of most of the incredible sales reps I've ever met or talked to on this series is very similar, which is um, they're not just trying to sell you a package. They're actually going to go in, they're going to ask you questions, they're going to learn about your business. Every day isn't about getting a yes or a no. It's about learning stuff. And eventually you get to a point, and sometimes it's over a conversation, and sometimes it's over a series of conversations that you put together the idea that there's just no way they can say no to, because it makes complete sense. And I think most
Absolutely.
salespeople, they get tied to no's and yeses instead of advancing down the field. And I never really feel, I know that when I'm asking someone to buy something, they're probably going to buy it because they know I don't waste that ask. Like, I
Yes.
don't waste it. When I
Yes.
ask it, it's earned, and the things I'm bringing to them, they can't dispute. They go, yeah, that all makes sense to me.
I think that's right on. And that's probably, again, maybe where my sales manager gets a little frustrated with me. I'm not going to pitch everything. I'm not going to go in there every month and pitch everything, because I'm going to lose them. I'm going to lose their trust. I'm going to go in and pitch. Not that I never pitch anything new, let's be honest, but I'm going to go in there and pitch what I know is a fit and keep their respect and trust.
Yeah.
Does that make sense? Because I think if you're in there all the time pitching something all the time, again, my sales manager is going to kill me, but I think you lose the customer. I think you burn them out, you lose them, and pretty soon they're not listening to you anymore because you've lost the trust. You've gone from being a partner and offering them a marketing plan that makes sense, where they trust you, to you're just another salesman trying to ding. And I think, especially, I don't know how it is in big markets, but especially in small markets, that is not the position you want to be in.
I'll give you a thought that might make your sales manager happy, and might solve, because I get what you're saying and I don't disagree with it. What I did when I was a rep to avoid that, because I got caught in a weird position once where I felt that exact same way about a customer and I didn't offer something to him. And then afterwards, he was upset when he found out his competition.
I've had that happen. I get that.
So what I do now is just like, if something comes out like the Super Bowl event or whatever it is, can't say Super Bowl, but it's timely. I just send a note and say, hey, this is something we're doing. I just want to make sure you know it's available.
Yep.
If you're interested, let me know. It's not a sales pitch. It's just a like, FYI, we do a ton of cool stuff at the station, and I don't ever want to make a decision for you. I don't have a direct recommendation to this, but there might be something that's happened since I last saw you that you go, wow, that is right for me. I'm just letting you know it exists. And then that way I can say, I don't get in trouble from my sales manager, nor do I get in trouble from my customer that goes, wait a minute, why didn't I'm with you all year round. Why didn't you offer me that?
And I will tell you that there are a lot of times where I'm like, I wish I would have pitched some of those smaller things, because that was the difference between making my month or not making my month. Does that make sense? Because it was just that little bit of a push. And then telemarketing will sneak it up and they'll get it, right? Which I love. The blessing of being I think a solid salesperson to your clients is, I have clients that call me up and said, some telemarketing person called me and tried to sell me this. I'm buying from you. What are we doing here? So I do have those customers where I do some of those emails where they're smaller events, they're smaller this or that, and I'll send it out to them and just say, just a heads up, but you might. So I do that as well. It's that balance. I think you've got to find that balance, and I think you've got to, push yourself and not over push your customer. It's a fine line.
I know that there's probably the people that watch this on YouTube, because some people listen as a podcast, some people watch on YouTube. For those that are watching on YouTube that are hardcore salespeople, they're looking at that list behind you and they're very concerned that Tuesday is not sold out on the morning trivia.
I just sold it this week.
Oh, you did? Good. That makes me feel better, because I was like, we got to get on that. Like, I can't have that hole sitting there.
I just sold it this week, so that's a good thing.
That's awesome.
I think we have, I think as a radio group, a lot of times you have so many moving pieces. I will say that's probably sometimes what I love about it, and sometimes what's a struggle, because we have so many packages. Sometimes it's trying to, do them all justice. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think one of the problems we have as a radio industry, and I've never figured out how to solve it, because we're all these creative monsters. Like we get in a room and we go, hey, what if we did this, that? And all of a sudden we have this great idea. Everyone's like, let's go do that. And we create something new to sell and we're all excited about it, but we still have 5 or 6 other things that were invented that exact same way that we put all this work into, that the programming guys are doing every day. And we're just like a kid with a shiny toy, right? We're like, well, I want to go to the shiny toy. And there's all these other things. So I don't know how sometimes I don't know if you got to put a hard cap on it. We've tried everything in our company, and we often get to that same position. We're having a conversation with God. Sometimes we just have too many things to sell. But a lot of those things are designed for different businesses at different points in their career, at different points in the economy, at different points of the year and the weather. So I think all you can do is just be conscious of it and say, hey, when we get to the point where we're like, hey, we have too many things, let's cross a few out, let's cancel a few, and bring some energy to the ones that maybe need a little bit of help. But knowing that Tuesday is sold, that makes me feel a lot better. Oh yeah.
I definitely think that's the genius of us all working together, is the creativity and the energy and all of that. It's also the Achilles heel, just like you said. It's trying to figure that out, because there's many times where I'll run into a sales meeting in my boss's office and say, listen, I don't have this all the way thought out, but I got this idea running through my head. And then, and usually he's pretty smart and he'll say, well, do you have a sponsor for it?
Yeah.
And I'm like, well, hey, I have the idea.
Yeah.
Wasn't it a great idea? Yeah, it's a great idea. Do you have a sponsor for it?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. I think that's probably one way we keep things capped a little bit, is the rhetorical question of who's the sponsor?
Yeah. If it's worth doing, it's worth selling.
Yep. Yes. So
one thing before we let you go, Tracy, every seller, to improve customer service, we talked on that briefly, just how important it is. If there's one thing you could tell everyone to do tomorrow to improve their customer service, what would you recommend?
I think you need to be able to trust yourself and go in and not be afraid to just simply be a resource for them and not a salesperson, because it'll come. The sales will come, but you've got to be a resource. And whether that means you're just going in and you're talking to them about what their inventory problems are with COVID right now, we're talking, we talk a lot about the inventory problems. And I think it just goes back to straight on customer service. You have to have that relationship. And once you have that relationship, the selling's easy because they trust you. But you've got to stay up to date on what's going on in their world in order to be a resource.
Be a well, not a fountain, I believe someone once said, and that always stuck with me. Tracy Sirna, Northeastern Wisconsin with Results Broadcasting. Great conversations. Thank you so much, and all the best in the selling this year.
All right. Thanks, guys.